My name is Donna McDermott, and this video is about animal personality. The objective of this video is to define animal personality, explain how someone could study animal personality, and to sprinkle in a few consequences of animal personalities. The concept of an animal with personality can seem a little bit whimsical, but whimsy aside, this research is about characterizing how different individuals of the same species can be different from each other, and identifying why those differences might matter. It turns out it matters in a few different ways, like dictating how animals forage, how disease spreads in a social colony, and how human sampling and harvesting can select for certain behavioral traits in harvested and sampled populations. So how would you study this? Well, let's start by taking a step back. Traditional animal behavior research produces graphs that look like this, where a scientist is measuring some behavior that they care about and comparing two different groups to one another. In this graph, each point is the average of the group, and the line extending from that point is the variation within the group itself. So that variation might not matter at all. It could be that just the individuals at the top of this variation line had a snack just recently, and the individuals at the bottom of the line maybe were having an off day. But this variation might actually matter for a more meaningful reason. It could be due to differences in genetics, or hormone regulation, or life experiences, or some combination of all of those things. And it could be valuable to look at the differences between different individuals that aren't just meaningless noise. To figure this out, animal personality researchers compare individuals to each other. In these blue data points, the circle is the average behavior of one individual across multiple trials, and the line indicates the variation within that one individual between multiple trials. You can see that the variance within one individual is way smaller than the variance between individuals. Here, each individual has a distinct way of behaving, and it pretty much always behaves that way. We call this a personality, or in this graph, a couple of different personality types. Some researchers also call this a behavioral type, such as this researcher. Andy C. has described a lot of the foundational theory behind animal personalities. One of his earliest papers in this field was written over a decade ago about water striders. Andy C. showed that for water striders, activity behavior and aggression behavior were correlated, an example of what he calls a behavioral syndrome. A behavioral syndrome is a bunch of behavioral traits, or just two, that are correlated together across different contexts. For water striders, as for most animals, the most important contexts are things like eating, avoiding predators, and mating. Water striders that are very aggressive and active might have an advantage in finding food to eat, which could be why the correlation between these behaviors evolved in the first place. However, water striders that are too aggressive scare off potential mates. So the ideal water strider, then, would probably be an individual that is active and aggressive when finding food, but dials it back to win over a mate. This ability to dial it back is a layman's term for behavioral plasticity, the ability to change one's behavior to suit the environment. But water striders aren't that plastic. They're either more chill and good at mating, or they're more intense and better for foraging or avoiding predators. But their ability to switch personalities is limited. The idea that different individuals have different personalities and that those personalities are something of a limit to us is probably something that's familiar to you if you've ever socialized with other people. Okay, so if adjusting isn't an option, you might think that obviously natural selection selects for water striders that are a perfect balance, as active and aggressive as possible without scaring away potential mates. However, we don't really see that too often in nature. Instead of seeing some optimal behavioral type, instead we see personality differences like in this graph, which is the same as the one that I showed you before. You might expect balancing selection to iron out these personalities, but more often we see something like this: animal groups that are divided into two or more personality types. Or we might see animal groups that are divided into a situation where most individuals are pretty much the same, but a small number of individuals are outliers, called keystone individuals, because they often play some key role in the group. A sort of obvious and kind of boring example of that is something like a honeybee queen, where one individual does all the reproduction for a group. But what I think is more interesting is keystone individuals that are a little bit more subtle, like animals that are super social and because of that are also disease super spreaders, or animals that are super bold and because of that are really good leaders in foraging. That's the end of the summary for now. Next up in class, we'll be talking about the ecological and evolutionary consequences of personality types in more detail.